you can come and sit with me if you want. Hey? Oh. You want to sit here? You can sit there if you want. Yeah, that's a good spot. Hello everybody, welcome back to Lowry Crafts. This is my corner of the internet. It has been a little while since I sat down and updated you on my projects. So we're going to do that. I'm going to try and make sure this isn't a chunky episode because there's quite a few things for me to update you on, and I'm not going to update you on absolutely everything, but I will update you on most things. So I'm going to start with a couple of things that I finished since I last did a podcast episode. And the first thing is my Novice Slipover by PetiteKnit. So let me get that actually. This is she. This is my Novice Slipover. I can't really get the full, let me lean back. There you go. Full thing in the frame. This is knitted in Gepard Woolia in their navy colour. I did mention this in my last episode. I think I was just finishing the body, and that is what I have now done. I did not make many major adjustments to this pattern. I knitted the second size. The pattern does come with a lot of positive ease. I think it's maybe like 20 centimetres. Let me check that. 15 centimetres of positive ease is what the pattern says. And my gauge was slightly off as well. So you're supposed to knit it on a 5mm needle. And I knew that my gauge with Gepard Woolia would not be quite right. So I anticipated that and I went up half a needle size to a 5.5. But then that was slightly too big, too loose. But I stuck with that anyway. I committed to the kind of oversizedness of the pattern. And when I was partway through, I was having a little bit of a worry that it was too oversized, but actually this is perfect because it fits over my more oversized blouses that I like to wear in autumn and winter. Obviously, I'm not wearing this at the moment. I finished this a little while ago. I got a couple of days of wear out of it. And then it just became far too warm to wear this. But this was a stash busting project. So the Gepard Woolia was left over in my stash from a jumper that I made for my dad. And I wanted to use this up. And I was also teaching my friend to knit as well. So we knitted this project together. The only major things that I changed, other than kind of being slightly off on my gauge, were that I did regular rib for the collar, and then I did half twisted rib on the armholes and on the bottom as well. And that's because I did the collar before I had discovered half twisted rib, and I decided I didn't mind them being a little bit different, so I just left it. And that is all I have to say about that. It's a very basic pattern. It does what it says on the tin. It functions in my wardrobe. Fine, perfect. So that is my Novice Slipover. The next thing I have to show you is my Marielle scarf, which I have also finished. And I actually don't think I talked about this on the podcast before I picked it up again, but this had been on my needles for a really long time. It had been on my needles for about a year by the time that I finished it. It was something that I started last summer and then put down because it was kind of a bit of a background knit. Hi Flossy. Yeah, she's so cute. She's very distracting. It was a bit of a background knit, so I just kind of had put it down for a little bit, and I often knitted on it when I was travelling and things. So I decided I wanted to pick it back up again and kind of get it cast off in the name of finishing some of the things that were on my needles, and I did just that. So the pattern is a triangle scarf or shawl by Verden. And it's kind of pointelle lace inspired. The Marielle, there's a whole kind of Marielle series. There's a Marielle blouse, sweater, I don't know what it's called. And I think there's also a cardigan now, or the cardigan is coming. But I bought the headscarf /scarf/shawl pattern because I wanted to kind of itch that desire to knit something pointelle lace inspired without committing to a sweater straight off the bat. This was the first lace that I knitted. It was really easy. It really scratched the itch to knit lace. It also inspired me to knit more lace. I used leftover Filcolana Merci in this project as well. So the two things actually that I have to show you as finished objects were stash busting things, which is good. Filcolana Merci is 50% merino, 50% cotton, and it's superwash. And it's fingering weight as well. And I think this pattern calls for a DK weight, but what I did was I just went down to a 3mm needle. I think it calls for a 4mm needle. And I just cast on and I just kept knitting chart repeats until I was close to running out of yarn. So a really easy kind of stash busting project. When I bought it, there were only scarf sizes and the headband size, and there were no shawl sizes, but they have been added to the pattern now, although I don't know whether they've been added in English and Norwegian. I think they were sent to me in Norwegian. Maybe I should check that. But I didn't really need it, to be honest, because you just keep knitting until it's the size you want it to be. The chart was really easy to follow. It was really easy to kind of memorise the repeat once I'd knitted it a few times, so that was nice and easy. And I also like, although I can't speak to it too much because I haven't knitted it, but I like the headscarf version in the pattern, because one thing I don't like about triangle headscarves when they're knitted particularly if they're knitted in a chunkier yarn, is that the ends, when you knot them under the back of your hair, my hair is quite fine, and it just looks like a big lump at the back of my neck, and it looks a little bit weird under my hair. But this one comes with I-cord ties, and I think that's a really good design decision. So maybe I will knit that with some leftovers. Maybe that's another stash busting project that I could do. But this is my Marielle scarf / shawl in the colour Duckling. I really love this, and I actually really love this yarn in this knit as well. So I was not a huge fan of the yarn when I used it, and I used it to knit the Cumulus blouse, I guess as kind of a sweater, and I just didn't like the way it wore as a jumper, and I didn't like the feel of the superwash. But actually, as a kind of yarn for a summery / transition shawl or scarf, it's really good. And I really enjoy it in this particular project. So I'm really glad that I finished that. And yeah, I've worn this a couple of times already, particularly on the colder days in the last few months, although it feels like we haven't had a colder day for a really long time. It's boiling in this country. The world is melting. Apologies if the lighting keeps changing during this video. We are contending with some rapidly changing skies outside. Those are my two finished projects. Now I've got a couple of whips to show you. One of them is kind of a long-term background whip that I will quickly update you on, and I will do that first. So this is a kind of long-term background whip that I do not want to knit on at the moment because it is far too warm to be knitting wool jumpers, but I'm really pleased with how this looks at the moment. So this is my Maude Sweater by Coco Amour Knitwear, and I've been knitting this again for quite a long time. This has maybe been on my needles for a year as well, and to say it's been on my needles for about a year, and this is how far we've got. Yeah, anyway, it's not that I'm not enjoying it, it's just that other things take over. So I'm knitting this with Falkland Islands merino hand-dyed wool. I've talked about this many a time. It is from the knitting gift shop. I will put the details in the description below. I actually don't know when the last time I showed this on the podcast was, but I have joined at the front and I have joined in the round. Where's the round? There's the round. I have joined in the round. There's just a few more panels of texture to knit on the rest of the body, but I have put the body on hold because I have kind of got to the end of a ball of yarn. And I'm going to do the collar and then potentially do the sleeves as well before I finish with the body. I don't have an awful lot to say about this except that I am enjoying the yarn, I am enjoying the textured panels. It's very potato chippy to knit. It's just a bit of a background whip at the moment. Oh, I did actually, don't know if I've shown you this before, but I did make a mistake on the back and I've decided I'm just going to leave it. I think what happened is before you start this lace panel here, the pattern makes you increase or decrease like 1 or 2 stitches depending on your size in order to get the right number of stitches to do that lace pattern. And I can't remember whether my size asked me to increase 1 or decrease 1, but I think on the back I did the opposite of what I was asked to do, and that's what caused my problems there. I should say as well I'm knitting size 2 in this. So this is what I did. You can kind of see there at the, let me put my hand behind it so we can kind of see a bit better. At this shoulder where I've kind of messed up the repeat a little bit and joined some of these, I don't know what they're called, channels. Anyway, I've decided that no one can really see it except me. Although now you can all see it because I've shown you, but I've decided I don't care. I really enjoy the colour of this yarn and I will be very excited to wear it eventually, but right now I don't want to be knitting with wool. But I thought I would just update you quickly on where I am at with that. I actually do need to reclaim some of this yarn because I'd started knitting it previously into a completely different project, and I'm going to reclaim some of that yarn to knit the collar, I reckon. So that's what I need to do next for this. On to some more summery works in progress. This I showed in my most recent video, which was my summer knitting plans. But this is my modified version of the Cloud Top by PetiteKnit. And I think I explained in that video that I was inspired by the kind of mismatched button trend. And I thought, well, I should just modify a pattern that I already have instead of buying a new one. So I'm knitting the Cloud Top, but with a split down the front, basically. And this is where I'm up to. I am basically just knitting body length now. I haven't actually tried it on in a while, so I don't know how much more length I need to knit, but I don't think it's too much. It's in this lovely muted blue-grey colour by Sandnes Garn. It is Sandnes Garn Lena, and I will put the number in the description because I always forget which number everything is. This was going pretty smoothly until I finished both front panels and was ready to join in the round and realised that they were completely different lengths from each other, and I could not work out for the life of me what had gone wrong. I realised that the first one I'd knitted was probably too short, but I couldn't really work out why. I'd done too few German short row repeats or whatever. I'd missed out a chunk of the pattern. So I ripped that back, kind of frustrating, but fine. Ripped that back, started again, lost track of my German short row repeats, had to start again because I couldn't work it out. Did it again, missed out a different section of the pattern repeat, had to start again. Dropped one of my German short row turning stitches and I don't know how to pick those up properly. Like, they always look really lumpy if I try and rescue those. So I had to start again. I just had to rip back so many times. I was getting so fed up with it. The only saving grace was that it was barely any stitches, so it was quite quick to keep doing and redoing. But my God, was I fed up. Anyway, we fixed it. They are now the same length. We've joined in, well, not in the round, but we've joined under the arms, just knitting the body length now. I haven't decided how I want to do the button band yet. I think I want to just knit a bit of stockinette and I'm going to do yarn over buttonholes. and I'm just going to knit a bit of stockinette, like barely any stockinette, and then leave the sort of rolling edge on the front piece. I don't know what I want to do for the kind of the back piece, the bit that you sew the buttons onto. Haven't decided yet, so we will see. I think that's all I have to say about this. It's a pretty straightforward knit. I love the colour. I've got a real blue thing going on at the moment, particularly these kind of muted grey blues. But I have kind of put this to the side a little bit because something more exciting has got my attention. This is also an acquisition because I have recently bought this yarn. Now, I talked a little bit in my last video about potentially trying Drops Belle, and I have decided to do that. So I use Sandnes Garn Lina a lot, and Drops Belle is kind of the slightly more affordable option. I think Sandnes Garn Lina is pretty affordable anyway, but Drops Belle is even more affordable. They have very similar fibre blends, so they're a linen, viscose, cotton, don't know why I forgot cotton, linen, viscose blend, and they look very similar as well. So this is in the colour 40, which is called, I think, Plum Wine, and that's a pretty accurate representation of the colour. It's kind of a plum leaning burgundy, I guess. That's probably a poor description. And I wanted to try it out for the sake of kind of having tried it, seeing as it's so similar to a yarn I really enjoy. And so far I am really enjoying it. I will tell you what I'm knitting with it first. I am knitting, see if I can show you the lace. There you go. I am knitting the Seashore skirt by Kutovakika. I'm really, really enjoying this. It's a lot of fun. I started this maybe a couple of weeks ago, so I've been doing a lot of knitting on this. It is a fit and flare skirt pattern by Kutovakika that I talked about in my summer knitting plans. This is the first time I've ever knitted a skirt, so I'm very excited. I'm knitting size 3, but I'm going to be honest, I don't think I'm on gauge, and I haven't checked, so I don't know. I know that my gauge with Sandnes Garn Lina is looser than what Kutovakika calls for in the pattern. So even though I'm not using Sandnes Garn Lina, she calls for, I think, a 4mm needle, and I think it's like a 21 stitch gauge. And I know that my stockinette certainly is a 19 stitch gauge. And I know that my lace knitting is not much tighter. So I just decided that the yarns were similar enough. I was just going to cast on and see. I decided to knit the 3rd size because I was in between the sizes for the 3 and the 4. So I had the hip measurement for the 3, but the waist measurement for the 4, I think. But I decided that seeing as I knew my gauge was going to be a bit looser than what was called for, I was going to go for the smaller size, and hopefully that would land me somewhere in between the two. I haven't checked, but I have tried the skirt on and I am happy with how it fits so far. I'm hoping when it blocks out it will be a little bit looser. I don't want the top bit to be too fitted, because what I think I've decided to do is, when I was doing my summer knitting planning, I wasn't sure whether I wanted to knit the shorter size or the midi size. So there's 2 lengths in the pattern. There's one for a kind of above the knee length, and there's one for a midi length. And I didn't really want a midi skirt, but I preferred the look of the midi skirt, and I couldn't really work out why. And actually, I think what it is that I don't want the lace sections to be too equal. I don't know if that makes any sense. Basically, the skirt's kind of made out of 2 main lace charts. There's chart A and chart B. Chart A is kind of the more fitted bit, and then chart B is the more flared bit. And in this shorter version of the pattern, they're kind of equal in length, visually, roughly. And I think that's what I didn't want. I wanted I think on me that would make me look more squat than I am. And I didn't want it to kind of make me look shorter. What I wanted to do was kind of have a longer section of chart A and then a smaller section of chart B, so it's a bit more like a kind of frill hem at the bottom, but still be above the knee. So that's what I'm going for. I've still got a long way to go, therefore, with knitting chart A, which is what I'm at the moment. I've got a good few centimetres of length on this, and I don't know how much this is going to grow when I block it and with the length of it being a skirt. So I think potentially what I might do is try and knit the waistband before I move on to chart B and maybe give it a mid-project block to see how much it grows. But I'm really enjoying the knitting process. I just really hope it looks the way I want it to, the way I imagine it in my head when I finally finish this skirt. I should tell you about the yarn that I'm using. I started talking about that and then I got distracted talking about the pattern. I'm using Drops Belle, which is very similar in composition to Sandnes Garn Lina, which is a yarn that I really like. I have got both yarns here, so this is Sandnes Garn Lina, and this is Drops Belle. They are very similar. What I've noticed so far working with them is that there's a very slight difference in feel, but it's really minor. I would say the Sandnes Garn Lina is slightly softer. And I would also say that the Drops Belle, the most noticeable thing for me is that it is more loosely plied. I don't know whether plied is the right word, but these twists are quite loose and I find they are more splitty than the Sandnes Garn Lina. It comes untwisted while I'm working with it more frequently. However, I don't think that is a big enough deal breaker for me to not use this yarn again. Although I am still slightly put off by the cost, and I know that's a bizarre thing to say because this is cheaper, but I just don't understand how it can be so much cheaper. Unless this is a really expensive yarn for what it is. I didn't think it was, but maybe if it is. Let me have a look at how much I paid for it. So I paid £2 per ball for the Drops Belle, and I bought 8 balls because I wasn't sure what length I wanted to knit. So that was £16. And then I usually pay £5.15 for Sandnes Garn Lina. So that's quite a significant difference. And I don't think this yarn is significantly worse in quality than the Lina that I'm used to using. As I said, there's been some differences that I've noticed, but it's certainly not enough to put me off using it. I know a lot of Drops yarn is affordable. I don't really understand how Drops is produced or how it's so kind of cheaply produced, how it's kept affordable. So if anyone has any information on that or knows kind of where to look for that kind of information, I'd be quite curious to find that out. Because I think that's something I'd like to consider when I make a decision on whether or not I want to use this yarn again. But so far, I'm having a pretty good time with it and I'm really enjoying the knitting process for that skirt. Let me know what you're working on at the moment while you are watching. If anyone has advice on doing elastic waistbands for skirts, actually, I would quite appreciate any advice you have to give. And I will see you again shortly. If you are playing Yarn Chicken this week, I hope you win. Bye everyone.